Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to have all of you with us here today. I'm Shana McLean, Manager of the Disasters Program within the Earth Sciences Division. We have a packed agenda and so much to share today as we celebrate the launch of the Disaster Response Coordination System. Today, you'll hear from NASA leaders and some of our valued agency partners in the disaster response community. We are all proud to share how this new system enables organizations and communities to put earth science into action and to inform critical decisions and respond boldly to extreme events. To start us off, please welcome NASA Administrator Senator Bill Nelson.
Good afternoon. When you look back at Earth from the window of a spacecraft, it's a remarkable sight. You see that the planet is not only beautiful, it's so colorful, it's so creative, it's suspended in the middle of nothing, and yet it looks so fragile. It's precious, it's delicate. And you see, and you have the realization that we're all in this together. We are citizens of planet Earth. You don't see the borders. You can see, obviously, the geographical borders. You don't see the political borders. You don't see religious division. You don't see racial division. You see our home. And when you have that kind of view, there's actually a label for it. It's called the overview effect. And every space flyer has it. What it did for me, it made me more of an environmentalist. It made me want to be a better steward of this God-given creation that we call home. And so recognizing that it's our only home, maybe it's up to us to protect it. So NASA, in addition to being a space agency, is an aeronautics research agency. It's also a climate agency. And that's because of all the instruments we have up there and that what have been observing Earth for the last 60 years. The data, the images from more than 24 satellites, it confirms what you and I are seeing right here on Earth. There is a flood today in Miami, Florida. 20 inches of rain within a short span of time. There are droughts, there are heat, there are fires, there are earthquakes and landslides, there are tornadoes, there are storms and hurricanes. Back in the 90s, I had been elected as the state treasurer, which was also the insurance commissioner. And I'll never forget, 1995, I saw a satellite photo of the Atlantic between the coast of Africa, the Caribbean, and Florida. And there were 5 hurricanes in a line, as if they were on final, coming to my state. And some of them hit my state. And of course, that was after we had been taught the lessons in 1992 from Hurricane Andrew, the monster that fortunately didn't hit downtown Miami. It hit southern Dade County, but it was a Category 5. I'll never forget flying in a Coast Guard helicopter after the hurricane. Everything was leveled. 2 structures that were still standing in downtown Homestead. One was the bank, and the other one was an old Florida cracker house that had been built in the 20s to withstand the winds. So you piece all this together, we're in a climate crisis. May, the month of May, was the hottest May ever on record. And that's in a 12th month-over-month record in a row. The heat is hitting hard in Arizona, California, Nevada, Texas, communities all around the world. And of course, hurricane season is starting up. And we're going to have more storms than normal this year. In fact, the World Economic Forum named extreme weather as the leading threat over the next decade to global well-being. And so it's easy to see why. The planet is ramping up to an average of 1.5 disasters per day. And when a disaster strikes, all of your agencies are there. So is NASA to help at home and around the world. And so as these challenges from extreme weather grows, so too does the value of not only NASA's, but your agency's capability to observe the Earth and to provide comprehensive, sophisticated, critical data to the teams on the front lines. Now, we've done so for over 60 years. We've done so for teams like those in your agencies, the U.S. government partners and the international partners that are here present today in this room. We've done so for relief organizations around the world. And now we, NASA, hope to be more help than ever before. And that's because we're launching the Disaster Response Coordination System. When our data on disasters is in one place, when it's as agile, accessible, actionable as it possibly can be, that is superpower. And it can help key partners around the world take even more decisive action. It saves time, it saves lives. Just think about all the ways that NASA has helped in the past, even before this system came along. So, for example, there was a devastating earthquake a year ago in Turkey and Syria. We monitored landslide activity. We provided detailed maps of wreckage, and we updated them in real time. That helped on-the-ground teams get food and water to people. NASA has helped when these floods have submerged a southern region of Brazil that is home to more than 11 million people. And we captured from our data not only the extent of the flooding, but also the depths of the waters. We identified over 3,000 landslides that took place. And that all helped the teams on the ground navigate the situation. You remember 3 or 4 years ago, an entire high-rise condominium collapsed in Miami Beach. We've got an instrument that could go and detect a heartbeat as they frantically search for people who were at sleep in their bed when that whole half of the building collapsed. Just recently, we helped Chile respond to wildfires, and that includes a fast-moving fire in February this year, potentially that nation's deadliest fire on record, and our satellites have helped to map the total area burned and the way the fires evolved over time. So just last month, another example, when massive storms called caused blackouts here in Houston, in our own country. The blackout, the electricity blackout, took place right at the time a heat wave hit. Now, if you've ever been through a hurricane and the electricity's out, and guess what comes next? The heat. Well, that's what happened without a hurricane in Houston. And we've got data we call black marble data, which helps produce images of the Earth at night. And from that data of what the Earth looks like normally with the lights, and then what it looks like after the blackout, we could help first responders size up where they needed to go in the city because of the blackout. And that's data from space. And it helped assist people most in need and most at risk. And it was the first time that we were activated to respond to an extreme heat event. And so these are just some of our NASA capabilities that this system will make stronger. And by the way, our Earth Information Center, which the physical location's the other end of this building, but it's also available to anybody, anytime, on earth.gov. Soon, it's going to incorporate this data on the new disaster dashboard. So no matter what the crisis is, no matter where the crisis is, we're, along with all these other folks represented here, are going to be ready to help. And the power and effectiveness of disaster response often comes down to getting the right data to the right people at the right time in the right way. And that's what this system is all about. It's a one-stop shop for game-changing data. It'll help you, our key partners, when disasters come. And that means we can save time, we can save lives. Together, we can do this. So, Karen St. Germain, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Administrator Nelson, and thanks to you all for joining us today. And especially a warm welcome to the leadership from our partner agencies. We have in the room with us leadership from NOAA, FEMA, USGS, USAID, and NIST. So again, thank you for being our partners and thank you for joining us today. The launch of the Disaster Response Coordination System, it comes at a pivotal time. Humanity, as the administrator just said, humanity is facing some urgent challenges. Of course, we understand that climate-related hazards are increasing, and in many ways, so is our vulnerability to those hazards. Just as one example, we have something in the neighborhood of 10% of the global population is living in low-lying coastal regions, and they are facing increasing risk of storm surges, large waves, tsunamis, as well as even rapid erosion events. And that's just one type of exposure. Our home planet is a pretty complex place. It's a pretty complex system. And of course, when you introduce human decision-making into that system, it becomes even more complex. But preparation for and recovery from disasters is a topic that I'm personally very, very passionate about. My first experience as a scientist was flying through Hurricane Gilbert in 1988. I was a brand new graduate student. And those of you who remember Gilbert will recall that too was a monster of a hurricane. It was the largest and most intense tropical storm we had ever seen in the Atlantic basin. It took more than 300 lives in 10 different countries, and it left more than 35,000 people homeless just in the Yucatan Peninsula alone. That storm produced 35-foot waves, 160-mile-an-hour surface winds, 14 inches of rain, and all of that fueled raging floodwaters. So when I talk about the people who lost their lives in the Yucatan Peninsula, many of them were never found. That was my first introduction to the relationship between science and disasters, because the work I was doing was feeding directly into our National Hurricane Center to try to improve forecasts and warnings of hurricanes. So this is in my DNA. Earlier this year, the Earth Science Division at NASA, my team at headquarters and from the centers around the country that do Earth science work, we built an Earth Science to Action strategy. That strategy is intended to meet the challenge of this moment. The disaster response coordination system is one of the really key elements of that strategy. The idea is to close that last mile between what we know within the science community and the community of people who can put that science to use to inform decisions they have to make on the ground every day. Leaders at all levels, from neighborhoods to nations, need actionable information, and they need it where and when they need it. And that's really what we're talking about here when we talk about partnering with our sister agencies, is trying to close that last mile and get what we know into the hands of people who can use it to make their critical decisions. And this is especially true for disasters. So I'm really excited. We have been partners with the agencies, our sister agencies here in the room, for many years. I'm really excited, though, about launching this capability, which I think is just going to inject a lot of new energy and new capability into our longstanding partnerships. So today you will hear how we are building bridges across disciplines and up and down all levels of government, from local to federal, to help communities in those most vulnerable moments. You'll hear how partnerships are fundamental to the work we will do moving forward to mitigate the impacts of climate change and effectively respond to events. And you'll discover how the new disaster coordination system will enhance our efforts at NASA to amplify the impact of the investment that our fellow citizens are making in our science. We want to make that science matter where and when we can. So now I think why don't you join me in welcoming my friend and colleague, Clayton Turner, the director of NASA's Langley Research Center. Welcome, Clayton.
It's my pleasure to join you today in celebration of the official launch of the Disaster Response Coordination System. Allow me to first and foremost thank Administrator Bill Nelson, Science Mission Directorate Associate Administrator Nicky Fox, and Earth Science Division Director Karen St. Germain for this opportunity. Because of your support, NASA Langley Research Center has the honor of hosting the DRCS Project Office. We are excited to lead this important agency-wide initiative and look forward to working closely with our partner centers to make the DRCS an incredible success. At NASA Langley, we focus our attention on ways to ask the right questions and to let our wonder lead the way. It is this wonder that changes the world. We wonder, what if NASA was able to leverage the capabilities of all our partner centers, harnessing the world's best available science, data, information, and expertise in response to local and global disasters? That question is truly at the root of what the DRCS is all about. This effort would not be possible without the network of NASA centers nationwide that each bring extraordinary capabilities and knowledge to bear for all. At this time, I would like to recognize the representatives from the DRCS family. Ames Research Center, Goddard Space Flight Center, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Johnson Space Center, Langley Research Center, and Marshall Space Flight Center. Please give them all a round of applause. This incredible team of people represent the vanguard of capabilities that NASA has to offer. Along with them stand countless teammates, the scientists, engineers, support staff, and subject matter experts that embody the wealth of data and knowledge that NASA brings to the table in the disaster response sphere. This is a team we can all be proud of. Now I have the pleasure of welcoming back to the podium Disaster Program Manager, Dr. Jainey McClain.
Thank you very much, Clayton. So within the disasters program at NASA, we really seek to build communities that are resilient to disasters, and we do this by advancing science-informed decision-making. Disasters, we all know, will continue to occur, but we can work directly with our partners domestically and around the world in order to integrate the approaches necessary and improve our understanding of disaster risk, response, and recovery in ways that help us forge a stronger future. Together, we are here today to celebrate the launch of the Disaster Response Coordination System, a core element of the disasters program. This DRCS is focused on advancing science for the operational response community. Climate change is impacting the very nature of natural hazards. It's increasing the frequency, intensity of hazards, and it's increasing also the impacts of disasters to communities around the world. And it's leading to more protected situations of insecurity. In fact, direct losses from disaster events have more than doubled in the last 30 years. And the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction estimates that we'll face, on average, 1.5 disasters every single day between now and 2030. But there's still a reason, despite all of this sad news, for hope. We are in the midst of a technological and scientific renaissance that is now more than ever providing critical insights into our changing planet. The SWAT mission is improving the forecasting of when and where floods are likely to occur. Our recently launched PACE mission is advancing coastal management and the impacts of oil spills and other marine debris. And our upcoming NISAR mission will provide critical insights on earthquakes, landslides, volcanic eruptions, and so much more. But making science available is not enough. Because humans are at the center of disaster impacts, they must also be at the center of how we design our approaches for disaster response. That's why the DRCS will ensure networked access to experts across NASA, timeliness of data and partner-driven data products, and integrated approaches that build the very capacity of our partners to continue advancing their operational missions. We've designed the DRCS in a very deliberate way so that together we can more effectively bring a One NASA approach to accessing our science, technology, and expertise to make the world a safer and better place for people everywhere. Now, to explain the DRCS structure and what you can expect from the DRCS team from all of the centers that Clayton mentioned, it's now my pleasure to introduce the DRCS manager, Josh Barnes.
Thank you, Dr. McClain. Fundamentally, the Disaster Response Coordination System is a network of NASA science, data, and experts who can help provide actionable information to support disaster responses through improved situational awareness, decision support, and insight into complex hazards. At the core of the DRCS is a request-driven system that relies on connections with disaster response organizations to field real-world challenges. We're launching a structured and deliberative method to support our emergency management partners domestically and internationally by leveraging this wide range of capabilities across the NASA enterprise. NASA has access to some of the world's foremost experts on hazards and a robust Earth observation system that provides insights into disaster impacts in areas that may be too large or too inaccessible or too remote. This work drives us to find ways to apply the best available science to address the complex challenges that disaster responders encounter. Those challenges can range from assessing the full extent of flooding across an entire country to describing the cascading impacts of severe weather and infrastructure failures like extended power outages across a metro region. Like in the image here, after Hurricane Ian, understanding the full scope and scale of what the connections are to the existing data and expertise is critical to see how we can drive and guide the decision-making on the ground. So working with our partners, we can bridge the scientific community with the disaster response community to leverage the data and information of Earth observation data to provide a broad view of the extent of hazards. Our deliberative approach works to make more available the rich resources that are already available. In Brazil, the DRCS was also helpful in trying to understand the depth of the water that happened in the flooding there, as well as the flood extent to help the local decision makers map that and respond accordingly, so it can help bring insight into complex disaster challenges that they faced. So using the best available science, we can work with our partners to provide insight into the size, scale, and complexity of disaster challenges. This insight can be used to drive resource allocation decisions, take protective actions, and support the staging of disaster relief services, all using Earth observation sciences. By being request-driven, we're constantly working to find answers to difficult questions. Like the administrator mentioned, the recent power outages in the Houston area can highlight the complexity of these cascading hazards, and understanding the damage to the built environment, and most importantly, the impact of people. But fundamentally, we can't do this alone. Partnerships are key to our collective goals of reducing loss and improving resilience and building the capacity of our communities to deal with disasters. This is a two-way process. It is not just a discussion, but the cultivation of a shared understanding of what the disaster response community needs and what the science community can bring to bear to support those needs. Now, please, let me turn the podium back to Dr. Jainey McClain for a part of today's program we've all been looking forward to, the Interagency Discussion Panel.
Wonderful. So as Josh mentioned, obviously partners are central to what we're doing here. And so it's wonderful to be able to now invite our esteemed agency partners to this stage. So please join me in welcoming first and foremost Deputy NASA Administrator Pam Melroy, Deputy Administrator of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Jainey Bavishi, Associate Director of the Natural Hazards Mission Area for the U.S. Geological Survey Michael Grimm, Deputy Assistant to the Administrator for USAID's Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance, Diana Darsney de Salcedo, and Deputy Administrator of Federal Emergency Management Agency, Eric Hooks, and finally, Senior Research Scientist from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, Judith Mitrani-Reiser. Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to have you with us here today. So I'm going to start off by asking a specific question of each of you that's really focused on priority initiatives for our respective agencies. And so the first question is, what is your agency's role in disaster response? And how do you currently use Earth observations for improved situational awareness? And we'll start with you, Pam.
Thanks, Shana. First of all, it's absolutely fabulous to welcome my interagency colleagues here today. This is a very exciting moment for us. We really do believe in the power of collaborations and how absolutely critical it is to be successful. That's really core to the way we do our mission. Speaking of our mission, we study the unknown in air and space for the benefit of humanity. One of the unique things that we do is we study Earth as a planet. So in a very holistic sense, we build the Earth-observing satellites and the support structure, the analysis, the modeling, the data validation, and all of those tools to study the Earth as a holistic system. And that's really very powerful in that sense that we're bringing that data in a unique way to bear. So as applied to disasters, obviously that data is absolutely critical at the front end. Right? We're understanding the stress that we're seeing in the land and the vegetation. We're seeing what's happening in the atmosphere. We're using the latest tools. We're a scientific organization, so we're constantly launching new technologies into space. And as a result of that, we provide a lot of basically the situational awareness. I remember somebody in industry telling me once, you're the intelligence organization for climate, because we're the data collectors. So we bring that data forward, but it's not just at the front end. It's also at the back end. It's how are we recovering from that mishap? From that disaster? How is the Earth bouncing back from that? So we provide that foundational knowledge.
Thank you, Pam. Jainey? Your thoughts?
Thank you. Thank you to NASA for inviting me to be here today. It's always a pleasure to be in conversation with my interagency colleagues and explore how we can strengthen how we deliver services to the American people. And congratulations to the DRCS team for this moment of being at the launch. So NOAA is a boundary spanner. We operate at the nexus of science and action. And we operate across different timescales as well, in the lead up and in the immediate aftermath of a disaster, but also in the work of building long-term resilience. And NOAA has an operational mission when it comes to disasters. For NOAA, we are mandated to ensure that our observations inform public safety. This has been covered, but it's important to just say that the impacts from severe storms have been responsible for 150 to 250 deaths per year in the U.S. and cost hundreds of millions of dollars. On average, flash floods from severe storms are killing over 130 people per year, and tornadoes kill more than 50 people per year. But the silver lining is that amidst these human and economic costs of climate change and extreme weather, the fatality rate from the weather events continue to decline. And that is because of the improvements that we've seen in weather forecasting and communications. So our National Weather Service in particular provides public safety services, working directly with emergency managers, but also local and state officials. And the ultimate goal of the National Weather Service, with all the observations and models that it works to collect and create, is to provide impact-based decision support services, the operational service delivery to decision makers to inform them and assist them in the decision-making before, during, and after a disaster. So what does this look like? Before, observations and analyses provide situational awareness. These analyses are used to initiate forecasts and provide estimates of ultimate impacts from extreme weather. This can inform things like pre-positioning assets and operations for first responders during and after the event. During an event, observations provide continued situational awareness. And then after an event, observations can be used to provide before and after imagery to assess losses and damages. And while the National Weather Service collects many of its own observations through the Automated Surface Observing System, through the Mesonet, through the National Data Buoy Center, through Operational Radar Program, this is truly an agency-wide effort. NOAA also has the satellite service, which provides important satellite imagery and observations and models, ocean observations from the National Ocean Service, and hurricane data from our Office of Marine and Aviation Operations. So I could go on and on about specifics as to what this looks like, but I want to make sure I leave plenty of time for my co-panelists to speak. I do want to mention one more thing, which is that I want to highlight that we are also working to integrate different types of knowledge into how we conduct our observations, including local, place-based, and indigenous knowledge. We currently have a Bering Sea ice survey underway right now that has done really thoughtful work around cultivating partnerships and building trust relationships with Alaska Native villages and communities, including coordinating flight profiles with local Native leaders, inviting authorized members of the indigenous community to join the science team on board on board the aircraft during missions to share firsthand experience and local knowledge. They've even created a patch with the project's motto translated into Inuit languages. So we know that our services are only as good as the value they provide to their users, and one way to make sure that that value is maximized is to make sure that we're integrating local and place-based knowledge into the services we provide.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for the invitation. USGS is honored to be here for the launch, and wonderful to be here with you all. USGS, of course, has a broad set of mission areas. We do research in geologic, hydrologic, ecologic, and mapping science. We provide foundational data sets, and we monitor natural phenomena, and we translate that research into action. And that's the key. There's a theme going through here, obviously, with translating research to action. How does it look at the USGS? I think about the Earthquake Hazards Program. We're often the lead on the scientific side of post-disaster investigations. Administrator Nelson mentioned Syria. And Turkey-Syria earthquake in 2023, where Earth observation data was critical to the USGS in looking at the impacts in mapping post-fault rupture zones. He mentioned monitoring landslides and liquefaction and those pieces. So we collect data, of course, on the ground. Go to our Facebook page and you'll see people hanging over the side of a volcano, which is really cool, and it can be really dangerous. So Earth observation data really can augment and improve the data sets. So critical there. And I mentioned volcanoes. I think about the work that we do in very remote areas where we can't be on the ground, and monitoring those active volcanoes every day. Things like partnering with NOAA, with FAA, for example, on monitoring the extent of ash plumes that could impact air travel and the dependencies we have there on Earth observation data. Also looking at using that data from different satellites for deformation monitoring of understanding the processes with earthquakes. And like Jainey, I could go on and on with examples. Last one I would mention is the work that we do in coastal erosion and coastal change related to climate and sea level change, and the importance of that work at the local level on impacts and getting that information in the hands of emergency responders, in the hands of policymakers, so that we can have a more disaster resilient nation.
Great, thank you so very much. And I'm from the U.S. Agency for International Development and our Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance. And I like to think of us as sort of an ultimate consumer and user of a lot of the data, information, analytics, and modeling of the interagency partners that are here on the stage with me. And that's because, our role as a lead federal coordinator in international disaster response overseas is essential. And we have an amazing team of responders who can provide that life-saving food, water, non-food items, shelter, support in the immediate aftermath of a disaster. But we can't do that alone. And so we always utilize the unique capabilities and expertise of many interagency partners, well beyond those who are here on the stage. And when I sort of want to think about how we utilize that information, indeed, I want to sort of underscore that at the very strategic sort of resource allocation level, this is incredibly useful as we think through year-on-year planning and best utilization and strategic prioritization of humanitarian resources. But then during response, it's critical that we think through how and when and where and whether we activate or deploy disaster response personnel. We think about when and where to deploy prepositioned supplies, when we are sort of after the immediate aftermath, say, of an earthquake or a flood or a volcanic eruption. We're looking at the impacts on communities and really understanding how we should prioritize their different needs. And so that sort of Earth observation data is essential to us. The other thing that hasn't really been mentioned is we, in addition to the sort of very real response capabilities that we have, we absolutely prioritize investments in disaster risk reduction, early warning systems, planning, local capacity strengthening. And we know that those investments pay off when you're talking about, working with communities to have more seismically sound structures, or thinking through land, housing, and property decisions on where communities should locate or build certain like schools or community structures. And after disasters occur, we can use some of the satellite data to show that these investments, in fact, were worthwhile. I'm thinking recently of fires, wildfires that took place in Colombia and Chile, and we have been able to go back and look at the impacts of some of these disaster risk reduction investments and say, not only were we able to use satellite information in terms of modeling of where we think wildfires may spread, but also look at these communities over here and how they've weathered the storm or the disaster much better, and that's incredibly useful for us. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric.
All right. Pleasure to be with you all here today. Really, really excited for FEMA to be participating in this panel, and it's really affirming to hear from my colleagues and colleagues yet to come about the great work, and it has already become clear as to why we are all partnered here today. I'll boil FEMA's role and responsibility down to this simply. Our mission is to help people before, during, and after disasters. And as you've heard from our colleagues there are a variety of ways that we need to do that. And we want to be data-driven and intelligence-led to carry out all of those activities as well. So in the pre-planning with our state and local and tribal and territorial partners, we want to provide information that they can do smart community planning, mitigate against future threats that they may face. In the response phase, the data and the analytics that come along with that help us with pre-positioning prior to a storm hitting an impacted community. And the complexities have certainly increased throughout time. And then after, we work on recovery, and we want to start that recovery just as we are responding. We want to respond in a way that all communities can recover quicker and more and become more resilient after they have suffered the impacts of a disaster. And what you've already heard today, and what you'll hear probably repeatedly, is that emergency management and for FEMA being the nation's emergency management organization, we are 20,000 strong, but we do absolutely nothing alone. It requires the input and the collaboration of the partners here and all the people in our SLT community, from first responders, emergency managers, community planners. They all can use this type of information to drive us forward to become a more resilient nation.
Well, it's wonderful to be with all of you today and to work with you so closely in so many events. So I'm from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and NIST houses several disaster programs that you may or may not have heard of before. And so I'm hoping that I educate all of you a bit today on those. And we also support we also have a long history of studying disasters even before any of these disaster statutory programs came to NIST. So the first program that I'd like to mention today is the National Construction Safety Team Act. It authorizes NIST to investigate building failures that result in a substantial loss of life or have the potential of resulting in a substantial loss of life. The goal of these investigations is to establish the likely cause or causes of the building failures and to evaluate evacuation and emergency response procedures. NIST has to coordinate with all of these wonderful agencies in order to meet its mission for these investigations. We collaborate and coordinate with federal, state, and local entities that are also responding to the event. And each team is composed of members that are selected by the director of NIST and are composed of NIST staff and also of experts outside of NIST, a lot of times from our partner federal agencies, which is absolutely fantastic and enriches all of our teams. NIST has 2 ongoing NCSD investigations. One is Hurricane Maria's impacts on Puerto Rico, and the other one is the one that you heard from the administrator earlier today, which is the failure of Champlain Tower South in Surfside, Florida. Now, something that's very unique about this authority specifically is that it gives NIST subpoena power. We have a federal advisory committee that responds to Congress or reports to Congress on our activities. We also have credentials that are issued to us by our Department of Commerce. And all of these are really quite unique and different in the other ways that we respond to disasters. And the other 2 ways, and you've heard some of them before, our National Earthquake Hazard Reduction Program, or NEHRP. We're the lead agency, but we also partner with FEMA, we partner with USGS, and we partner with the National Science Foundation. NWERP, which is our National Windstorm Impact Reduction Program, also includes FEMA and NOAA and NSF. And both of these programs really seek to improve the understanding that these hazards have on communities, as well as developing and encouraging the implementation of mitigation strategies. So it's not just the response effort, but the very long tail of activities that come after studying and investigating these events so that we can reduce future losses and save lives. Earth observations can provide fast, high-resolution information about conditions on the ground that assist NIST in our various disaster response roles, help NIST scope preliminary reconnaissance activities, and also provide NIST with critical data to support investigations and studies under all of these authorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's so wonderful to hear about each of the unique roles that each of your agencies play, also critical roles, but also the complement of all of the work that we're able to do together as a result of it. And so maybe in the name of partnership, the next question is really focused on the nexus between the missions that you've articulated and the visions that you have for your agencies and what the opportunities are for with the disaster response coordination system. And so how can your current operations be improved through further collaboration in Earth observations and other approaches to science with this new DRCS? I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'll start with talking about DRCS a little bit. I think one of the great things about hearing each one of you speak is to recognize that we all have a slightly different lens at the data that we are using. And any of you who have ever worked data know that it's not always in the format you want it to be exactly for the problem you're trying to solve. So a key aspect of DRCS is to make sure that we are providing data in a way that is useful to all of our partners, that we can actually think about how we structure not just the collection, but more importantly, the dissemination that has the tailoring or the ability to tailor the way you need it to be. And I think that's, to me, that is a key part of DRCS. I just also want to say we have just joined the National Wildfire Coordinating Group because wildfires are a whole thing unto themselves, as you know, and that has this really amazing component, as does hurricane response and the things that you do in FEMA. But each one of the problems is tailored to the unique hazards of that, and so we're excited about being able to partner. For us, there's something that we say a lot, which is meet people where they're at. What do they need? Don't just sit in your science ivory tower and say, what is it that we're trying to get? What do you need? And how can we structure ourselves in a way, not just to make sure that we're presenting you the data in a way that's meaningful and usable, and not just accessible, but truly useful. But in addition to that, what we hear in return is how we can develop new sensors, new capabilities. The what I wish I really knew was. And that's our end of what we do. And I think through that interchange and that collaboration and the DRCS and the other partnerships that we're doing, that's what we're hoping for.
Yeah, this is an interesting question because I think there's so many opportunities for collaboration and partnership. We're always looking for opportunities to maximize the value of our observations, from data collection and collecting the observations themselves to service delivery, to find out where are the bottlenecks and where are we not using our observations to their maximum potential and value. One area that I think is emerging for probably all of us to some extent is the use of AI. AI-driven weather forecasts, I should say, are soon going to be supporting emergency response efforts. And in order to create those models, they rely on the analysis and the available observations that we have. So we are certainly going to be working to leverage partnerships, collaborate across our interagency family, but also with other sectors to research, develop, validate, and utilize AI forecasting models. And I think that's a space for continued innovation. And I should also mention that we have leveraged AI already to translate our weather forecasts into Spanish, and are working on doing the same thing for Samoan and Mandarin. So that's an exciting development in terms of meeting people where they're at. The other thing I want to mention here, though, and it's not related to disaster response services necessarily, but climate services, which are so they're so related to this conversation, is that NOAA recently issued an equitable climate services action plan, and it was directly responsive to feedback we received through a request for information that we put out last summer. And we essentially asked adaptation and resilience practitioners serving underserved and tribal and indigenous communities, what information do they need? Are they getting it from NOAA and other federal agencies? What are the gaps? And we got some sobering feedback, and we are currently working to socialize that information across our federal interagency family, because we want to make sure that everyone is hearing it so we can all continue to work together to deliver not only the data and information, but the decision support that local decision makers need in order to prepare for extreme weather and the chronic impacts of climate change. And one thing that I want to highlight that we heard is the need for technical assistance. It is not enough to just put out data and tools on a website. We really need to be in communities or working with trusted messengers to make sense of that data and to co-create products that can support decision making, and to really co-create a vision for what a resilient future for these communities looks like. We're working to implement that within NOAA and looking forward to sharing the feedback across our partners, both inside the government and out.
Wonderful. I think it's a great question, and I love the answers that we've had so far. I think it's about this meaningful engagement, like this event, and it's what we do after this event, how we go back to our agencies and maintain that connection, and talk about what's next. You know, the devil's in the details, and what do we take back, and what are those challenges when we look at our ability to share resources and information and skill sets, whether that's on the ground or Earth observation or whatever it may be in disaster response and building resilient communities. It enables agencies like FEMA and local police and fire to respond faster and save lives and ultimately build more resilient communities. You know, prior to coming to the USGS, I spent 26 years at FEMA, and so it's a pleasure to be here on the stage with Eric. And I think about, translating the science that the USGS does, or that NASA or NOAA or other science agencies, to make it truly useful, to make a difference in response, in recovery, in building more resilient communities. And that's what do we do when we get back from here?
Great. So, I mean, as we think about the scale and scope of our operations and where we need to respond, which is on average to 70 to 75 emergencies or crises in well over 70 countries each year, I want to think about how we can best use this in a few different ways. So one is, of course, the incredible utility and how much more we have to do in terms of early warning, and whether that is the continued investment and partnership in the historic famine early warning system network, which is just a standard in how we think about the impacts on food security, the impacts on families and communities of disasters, of conflict, of protracted crises or year-on-year displacements. And so there is this incredible ability that we have to understand and project what is going to be happening using Earth observation data and looking at the impacts on food security at the household level. The other, really important area as we think about the planet and the scale and scope of emergencies that we face is thinking around early warning systems for flash floods, for tsunami. And we are keen to continue investment and partnership in systems that provide incredibly early, useful, actionable information to communities. We have an incredible partnership with many of the agencies here on the table, on the stage, that look at reaching over 70 countries and 3 billion people with flash flood early warning systems. And so that's one area that, the world is hungry for it. We need to do more so that we can fine tune and hone those tools. So that's one just sort of key area, I think, that will be great to partnership. And I also want to, if we have time, talk more about really getting this information in an actionable way in the hands of the people who are closest to those impacted by disasters. And that is just an entire, we would need hours and days and maybe some PhD theses to work at how to get best at this problem. But we're incredibly committed to thinking through how we can support those types of systems and do our part to ensure that information not just is provided in a timely basis and actionable at communities, but is also taking into account the local indigenous knowledge of communities so that we're informed by what they're seeing. And I will say, I have seen these types of exchanges in play and in practice, thinking through when I was living in Ethiopia, 2015, 2016, El Nino drought, 2016 La Nina, there were desert locusts, and we were working with communities and pastoral communities who are trying to make informed decisions about where to bring cattle, where there were water resources, where there was grazing available, and that interplay of communities using science was incredible and saved lives and livelihoods.
Thank you again for that question. Great question and great responses by our panelists. You can see the complexity of any disaster. It can be tremendous, and partnerships break down that complexity. And so we have had historical partnerships with all of the agencies here. We've used the data from NASA and the other partners here that are on the stage to bring disaster relief and response to communities on sometimes the very worst day. At the end of the day, our charge is to save and sustain lives, and we all want to live up to that. And you've heard a constant theme about meeting people where they are, and that's extremely important, whether that's the end of communication, providing the information, and also leveraging the human element to this, because data for data's sake can fall on deaf ears in communities. So we will use this as a refinement opportunity to springboard us into the future, and I'm looking forward to that. We have already seen the benefits of the data and the collaboration and the interpretation of the data. We've seen that with NASA data and GIS data from our partners in Vermont in the recent floodings. We leveraged that data to pre-position assets in the reach communities and to inform communities through our early warning systems as well. So those are extremely valuable points that are brought to the table, and this will give us an opportunity to bring to the American public through this forum and to reaffirm our partnerships throughout our agencies, not just leaders talking on a stage, but for them to be engaged with one another, to collaborate at least more thoroughly with the understanding that at the end of the day, we're all here to save and sustain lives and protect property. And so I'm proud to be a part of this again, and thank you for that question.
I too love this question because I think collaboration is where our federal family shines. NIST has a long history of collaborating with other federal agencies, including NASA, to leverage scientific and technical assets in conducting thorough and cutting-edge investigations and studies of disasters. The DRCS's refinement of NASA's role in disaster response will further facilitate these existing cross-agency coordination effort. It will improve our communications and awareness across our agencies to facilitate timely, on-the-ground operations. And it will identify new scientific endeavors that are only possible, I believe, by working together. Improved Earth observations and interpretations of these observations can help NIST remotely identify damage across a region, which could support our teams in their development of reconnaissance plans and also keep them safe from hazardous local conditions when responding to these events. These remotely sensed observations could help identify the most perishable data that may need prioritization in any field campaign and subsequently create efficiencies in our field activities. For example, INSAR data has been shown to be effective at identifying potential regional displacement trends in disaster-impacted areas, which is hugely beneficial to our studies and our investigations.
Excellent. Thank you, all of you. Obviously, a lot of opportunity, I think, that's being shared. More tailored products, better translation, a lot of opportunity, I think, across different regional and local scales as well. So this question was directly about partnership with the DRCS. The last question I'm going to ask is really focused on more of a future visioning for improved disaster outcomes. And so, each of you, one last question. What is your vision for further integration or advancement of our interagency partnerships so that we can improve disaster outcomes in this changing climate?
Yeah, I'd like to pluck on a couple of the themes from the panel here. First, I'll start by saying I really resonated with your comment, Eric, about the complexity of a disaster. So good behavior starts at home. And one of the things that we have done is create a wildfires working group within NASA, because what we realized is we had people working on technology. Our aeronautics division is helping solve the problem there was a horrible accident in the last fire season of a drone and a tanker colliding. Of course, you have no cell service, you have no air traffic control, radar, anything like that. And yet increasingly these aeronautical assets are used both for suppression but also for situational awareness. And so our aeronautics division is working, since they're tasked with developing the way to integrate UASs into the national airspace. Guess what? There was a very, straightforward connection to that. So the challenge for us was to make sure that we knew what we were doing inside the agency around wildfires. And so that group has really helped us, because I think that's a key point that you made, that each type of disaster has its own complexity to it. I think the other theme that I want to pull on a little bit is that you are just seeing the tip of the iceberg. We all have partnerships with many other agencies that have constituents that are affected by climate change. So the U.S. Global Change Research Program, USGCRP, is coordinating us across all of these agencies and is directly looking at the climate services issue. One of the challenges, I think, for all of us is that everybody knows what to do with a weather forecast, but the dynamic range of what people need for climate services or climate forecasts is so different. And so a core aspect of that from the NASA perspective is not to recreate relationships with core constituencies. If you're a farmer, you're going to go to agriculture for your data. So rather than recreate new dissemination systems, we want to partner so that we can tap into and get that wonderful flow of information back. What do you guys need? And so then we get the end user feedback into our scientific endeavors, but at the same time, we are effectively leveraging what already exists as a communication system to get information out there. So, and then also, to bring in Diana, your comments, we also think that at a global scale, this has to happen. It has to. What we're seeing is a disaster for all of humanity, not just for one country. And if you have ever been to space, which I have, you know that what happens in one place is affecting the rest of the world. You cannot pretend that what we do in this country, like, look at us, we're doing this. Well, guess what? We got a whole world to save, not just the United States. And so we really value our international partnerships and the way that we are trying to interface with them as well. Because the more data we have, the better we'll be. And we have great partnerships all over. So if I could encapsulate kind of a big vision for collaboration, but I'm thrilled that DRCS is now at least a front door for us. Now everyone knows who to call.
Building very much off of Pam's points here, I think I would identify a couple different aspects to a vision. One is around data assimilation. The better we can assimilate our data, the sharper we can make our models and our predictive capabilities. And so we recently announced an investment of IRA funding into a data assimilation consortium to improve weather forecasting. But we need to continue to lean forward and advance our work on data assimilation, especially as we hear about all the data collection capabilities we have just on the stage here. The next part of the vision that I would call out, which I think is actually quite related, is around data equity. We know that there are gaps in our data, spatial gaps around rural communities, island territories, Alaska and Hawaii, and we need to close those gaps because we are perpetuating inequities in those places. We're working on doing a survey of all of our weather monitoring capabilities in the Pacific right now to understand where the gaps are and to be able to prioritize where new investments are made. We need to work on that together in a collaborative way. And then I would actually go as far as to say that it's not just that climate affects some of our agencies, other agencies that are not represented here. I think climate change affects every single one of our agencies' missions. And so we need to think about partnerships incredibly expansively. We need to partner with HUD. We need to partner with HHS because we know climate and the climate crisis and the affordable housing crisis are in a collision course. We know that the climate crisis has incredible impacts on public health. We're seeing them through the extreme heat events that have only been increasing across our country and around the world. So we need to be partnering with those agencies so that we're thinking about the entire spectrum of data collection, product design and delivery, but we also need to be thinking about data integration. People don't want to just know about the physical risks of climate change. They want to know about the societal impacts. So how can we partner with these agencies to integrate that data and deliver more tailored products?
Great. I want to go back to something that Karen said in her opening remarks about closing the last mile. And thinking about how we do that in a number of ways, technology-wise and data-wise. It makes me think about the Landsat mission and the multiple decades of partnership that USGS has had with NASA on those missions, and Landsat Next, and closing those gaps, because that is one of the most used sources of information out there for academia, government, people across the world, across the nation. And that's an example, I think, of closing that last mile. And then if you think about each program area, whether it's earthquake or volcano or landslide, whatever it may be, we can identify those gaps as well, working together on the data side. It also makes me think about closing the gap with social scientists and bringing social scientists into the equation at the beginning of the research rather than the tail end. And I know many of our agencies are working on the social science side of things and how people make decisions and how we make risk-informed decisions, or in some cases, not so well yet. So I wanted to also bring that into the discussion as well. So thank you.
So I think I'll kind of touch upon maybe one or 2 points. One is, of course, the world it's just getting harder out there, and the sort of types of disasters and hazards that we're used to are not just changing. We see more extreme heat, we see more intense storms, we see larger impacts, we see disease outbreaks and other issues. And so as we're looking at how we need to prepare and respond, the more data and science informed that we can be, the better. And I think some of our tools are sort of used to this brave new world, but others need to be refined and a little bit more adapted to the current mission set. I mean, for me, the vision is really just humanitarian assistance and a humanitarian assistance community that is better prepared, that is faster, that is more targeted, and that is able to deliver in a way that is certainly more effective and sustainable. And so this entire conversation is just one part of that vision. And I think, the other piece is that this is incredibly important as we think about this here in Washington, D.C. and at our headquarters, but we also really bring in the broader universe of partners, be them community, local, subnational, national, and international, to come with us on this journey and make sort of the use of science and technology part and parcel of resource allocation, of decision making, of budgeting and planning. And there is this sort of no shortage of opportunity. So it's really scary and it's a really exciting place at the same time.
I couldn't agree more. And as I reflect on this question and listen to my colleagues on it, one of the things that strike me is that we really want to live up to the vision of having a real all hazards approach, irrespective of what hazards and threats that we may face in this country and around the world. And the only way to really do that is to have a whole of government and whole of community solutions, and collaboration and partnerships are key to that. As I look around this room, one of the things that I know that we are already moving toward fulfilling that vision, we heard from Josh Barnes earlier today. I'm extremely excited that he is partnering with our response division. Our Assistant Administrator of Response, John Rabin, is here with us today, and they will be partnered together in our National Response Coordination Center. That's not FEMA Center. That's the nation's National Response and Coordination Center. So to bring those partners to the table, they've already had longstanding relationships, but to deepen those partnerships, to be able to translate that data and information in real time to be actionable intelligence, both for the response and then to inform the recovery. But and as I think about these partnerships, at the beginning of June, I had the great fortune to kick off hurricane season, so to speak, with NOAA. And so from those larger events down to the operational aspects of it, they're all important. But I also want us to use the data and leverage the partnerships to pivot toward mitigation, because the investments that we can make in mitigation ahead of time will save lives and save dollars on the back end. And so that's what I'm looking forward to.
Well, Mike, I loved your comment about the social sciences. At NIST, we strongly believe in this and integrate our physical sciences and social sciences in every study and investigation that we have of disasters, and I appreciate you mentioning that. I believe that the DRCS has an incredible potential to fortify the existing partnership that we have across all of our agencies that are seated here and those that are not here as well. I am so excited for your launch. Formalizing our agencies' coordination will improve the scientific tools that we leverage during the disaster response and afterward as we conduct investigations and studies. Regular coordination may introduce novel tools and analyses that we have not previously used at NIST and can help improve timeliness of accessing and sharing critical data of the disaster, which you've heard here from many of my fellow panelists. It'll also facilitate the measurement of disasters and their impacts on society. And after all, NIST is a metrology institution. The ultimate goal of our investigations and studies is to make recommendations to codes, standards, and practice that will achieve major, measurable reductions in the losses of life and property. Our statutory programs also promote the dissemination of knowledge and implementation of tools, practices, and policies that enhance strategies to withstand and recover from major events. This is especially true as we look forward, and I really appreciate several of you mentioning this, into updating building codes with good climate measurements that NASA satellites can bring to bear. For the past few years, NIST, NOAA, and the American Society of Civil Engineers have been working together to advance infrastructure planning and inform updates on climate resilience that would benefit from NASA's Earth observations. So congratulations on this launch. We're so excited to continue working with all of you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, each of you, for joining us here today, for sharing all of your insights and your visions. There's so much opportunity for the future, and ideally we're building a more resilient world together. So thank you to all of you for your sharing with us today, and also I look very much forward to what we build together moving forward. At this time, we're going to please invite and welcome NASA's Associate Administrator, Dr. Nicky Fox, up to the stage to close out our event.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here and to get the honor to kind of tie this up with a bow, this opening. So in the Science Mission Directorate, everything we do is interconnected, and our discoveries and our technological innovations build off one another to help humanity answer profound questions about the nature of our solar system and beyond, but particularly our place in our solar system. Most importantly, our work touches everyone on Earth, and it helps improve our everyday lives. We have over 140 active missions across the solar system, delivering NASA science every second of every day of every year. Our Earth Science Fleet in particular has been providing critical data on our land, our ecosystems, water, air, temperature, and climate for more than 50 years to increase our understanding of our home planet, improve our lives, and safeguard our future. It is really exciting to be here and see the Disasters Response Coordination System and how it's launching today. It represents NASA's major investment in changing the way we work and improving how we place the best available science into the hands of people who are solving real-world challenges every day, getting the data into the hands of people who need it and, more importantly, can use it. 2024 is already an active year for disaster response, and we're not even at the halfway point in our calendar year. And yet we've seen floods, landslides, extreme heat, tornadoes, and volcanoes, and they've made significant marks on our communities across the nation and across the world. As Pam said, this is not a national issue, it's a world issue. We're also now entering our 2024 hurricane season, and our colleagues at NOAA have predicted as many as 25 named storms this year, and no other pre-season outlook in history has predicted so many storms. And of course, while we are always ready to support our operational partners for the natural disaster events that we can predict on the horizon, most importantly, here at NASA, we are preparing for those disasters that we cannot yet foresee. One example of this is our Planetary Defense Coordination Office, and they are preparing far in advance alongside our interagency and our international partners to find, to track, and to better understand asteroids and comets that could pose an impact hazard here to us here on Earth. While space weather, something near and dear to my own heart, space weather can spark beautiful auroras across the skies, and I hope many of you were able to see the spectacular display that our sun gave us just last month. But while auroras are beautiful in the sky, they have the potential to cause disruptions for us here on Earth, and they can be dangerous for our spacecraft and for our astronauts that are in space. So to better understand and predict space weather, we have a fleet of heliophysics missions that are studying our neighborhood star, my favorite star, the sun. The need to better be prepared for the challenges we face today and tomorrow could not be greater. The Disaster Response Coordination System is NASA's recognition of such incredible challenges and is an investment in building our collective capabilities as we continue to confront our changing climate and its impacts on humans and on our environment. The public can see the latest data, models, and tools that NASA is using to better understand our changing world by visiting our newly opened Earth Information Center in NASA headquarters here in Washington, D.C. And as well, if you are not able to come here in person, you can go online to earth.gov and share in the joy of looking at our planet in every single different way. So I do encourage you to stop by and explore the new elements that highlight some of our data and the tools to better understand disaster response. And clearly this is just the beginning. We are continually advancing our robust data set as we enter into a new era of next generation Earth science satellites. Very soon, we will launch NISAR alongside the Indian Space Research Organization to study our home planet's most complex processes, things like ice sheet collapse, as well as natural hazards like earthquakes, volcanoes, and landslides. We've begun work on Landsat Next, as noted here, and that will actually continue the longest space-based record of Earth's land surface. We will build upon the Landsat legacy to create a more robust data set using next-generation technologies and more detailed data collection methods. And happy to report we've just confirmed the Grace-C satellite, and we will continue as we move on to confirm our new Earth System Observatory missions to build upon our existing data and create a 3D holistic view of Earth, all the way from bedrock up to the atmosphere. And it's a really exciting time. It's always an exciting time, by the way, to be part of NASA, but right now it's a particularly exciting time to be part of NASA and NASA science. So I would like to personally thank NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, Pam Melroy for joining us today, the whole Earth Science Division team who have been working relentlessly to get us to this point, led by the amazing Karen St. Germain, and to all of our partners, both our partners here in the room, our partners, our other interagency partners in the US, but also all of our international partners for the critical role that they play in allowing us to do what we do. And lastly, thank you to all of you who have come out today to be part of this event. It is really important. It could not be more important for us to stand together to support and benefit humanity. Thank you very much.
It's a new era.